All right, if I could, I'd like to call the January Board of Directors meeting of the Northeast Ohio Sustainable Communities Consortium to order. Thanks for coming out today on this sunny but very cold day, reminding us of what winters are usually like in Northeast Ohio. First order of business today would be just to introduce consortium members. So if we could start to my left here, we'll go around the table and introduce ourselves.
Medina County Commissioner Steve Hambley, representing NOACA.
Rachel McCartney from Eastgate Regional Council of Governments.
Joe Hadley with NEPCO.
Aaron Siegel, Summit County Department of Community and Economic Development.
Ed Cheris, Director of Regional Collaboration for Cuyahoga County.
Shauna Doherty, Cuyahoga Metropolitan Housing Authority.
Mike Lyons with the Regional Prosperity Initiative.
Gene Nixon, Summit County Public Health.
Mary Beth Deek, sitting in for Joe Calabrese, Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority.
Emily Campbell, the Center for Community Solutions.
Anna Diacetis, representing Mahoney County Commissioners.
Greg Brown, Policy Bridge.
Bill Davignon, City of Youngstown.
George Garchar, Catholic Charities Diocese of Youngstown.
John Getchy, Eastgate Regional Council.
Shara Davis, Lorraine County Community College.
Mike Challenger, Lorraine County Growth Partnership.
Bob Now, Stark County Regional Planning.
Fred Wright, Akron Urban League.
Kelly Harris, Administrative Assistant.
Hunter Morrison, Executive Director.
Grace Galucci, NOACA.
Jason Segedy, Director of AMATS, Greater Akron's Metropolitan Planning Organization. Hey, thanks for that. Next order of business is public comment. We'll look over to the table. I don't believe we have any. So we'll move on to item 3A, which is approval of the meeting minutes from the December 18th, 2012 meeting. The meeting minutes were in the packet, and looking for a motion to approve the minutes at this time.
I move.
Moved by Mr. Challenger. Second, Mr. Hadley. Any further discussion, questions on the minutes?
There needs to be a correction on the last page. The price for Sasaki should be $1.3 million, I believe. Looking at page 4. There's a period and not a comma.
No. Okay, that correction is noted. Any other corrections, comments, questions? If not, there's a motion and a second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 3B, which will be my last official action as the outgoing chair from 2012. It's been a pleasure working with all of you. Is the election of the 2013 NEOSCC officers, and this also includes the at-large members of the executive committee. You might recall in December we did have a slate of candidates put forward and voted on those, but this at our annual meeting here in January is to ratify that slate of candidates. There were a couple to be determined on there, so what I was going to do real quickly is just reiterate the slate of officers and the alternates on the executive committee, or the at-large members and their alternates on the executive committee, and then we'll have a vote ratifying them, and then at that point I will turn the gavel over to Grace Galucci, our new chair. As far as the officers that were nominated in December, that would be Grace Galucci from NOACA as chair, Bob Now from SCATS as the first vice chair, myself, Jason Segedy from AMATS as the second vice chair, Rachel McCartney from Eastgate as the third vice chair, Steve Hambley from NOACA serving as treasurer, and Fred Wright from the Akron Urban League serving as secretary. And then after that, we do have the at-large members on the executive committee, and the nominees for those positions were Jeff Dutton from the SCATS region, John Getchy from the Eastgate region, Bill Davignon as the Eastgate at-large member, with the alternate to be determined at a later date, Gene Nixon from the AMATS region with Donna Skoda serving as his alternate, Freddie Collier from the NOACA region at large with Shauna Doherty serving as his alternate. Representing NEFCO on the executive committee would be Joe Hadley with Connie Krause as his alternate. The Fund for Economic Future would be represented by Brad Whitehead with either John Mitterholzer or Bethia Burke as his alternates. And finally, the Regional Prosperity Initiative with Mike Lyons as the official member and Tom Tyrrell as the alternate. So with that, if there are any questions on that slate of candidates, could entertain those now. If not, would ask for a motion approving that slate. Grace.
I believe we received a memo from Tom Tyrrell removing himself as the alternate and placing Mayor Bill Curran on as the alternate.
That's correct. Good catch.
So the list that was approved at the December meeting is amended by Mr. Terrell's letter to us appointing Bill Curran.
Yeah, thanks, Grace. That's good correction, and so would ask that any motions or votes would be the names I read showing that correction, with Tom Tyrrell removed and Bill Curran serving as the RPI alternate.
We approve the slate.
Moved by Mr. Lyons. Second, Mr. Garchar. Any further discussion, questions, comments? If not, all in favor of the slate of 2013 officers and executive committee members, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And with that, I will pass this handsome gavel to Grace Gallucci, our new chair. Congratulations, Grace.
Thank you. The gavel is handsome, but the box is handsomer,
Yeah,
so I'd like that, actually.
I'll show you all the box.
Thank you very much. I first would like to say thank you to the nominating committee and to all of you. I appreciate the confidence that you have put in me, and I do want to let you know that I intend to work very hard to deliver, and I will not let you down. Secondly, I would like to thank Jason Segedy as well as the other outgoing officers for their hard work over the last year. And I had already commented during our last executive committee how Jason makes these meetings seem like they go so easy. And I learned from the chairing of the executive committee they're not really that easy. But nevertheless, again, thank you for all of your work. I also would like to thank and look forward to working with the new slate of officers. This coming year, 2013, will be very important for the Northeast Ohio Sustainable Communities Consortium. Not only do we have the continuation of the work that we have begun, we are at a very pivotal point for the organization itself as well as for the HUD grant. This is the last year for the HUD grant, meaning that we have a tremendous amount of work to complete in these next 12 months, as well as this is the third year for the organization to exist on its own, and therefore we really need to think about the future of the organization beyond the grant period. So those are the kinds of things that we'll really need to be focusing on over the next couple of months. And with that, I take you back to the agenda. And the first item that I need to introduce is item C, approval and update of the revision to the Code of Regulations. Before I ask for a motion for approval, let me talk a bit about this, in that we did discuss this at the executive committee. There were some points that we had some questions on, some concerns with. Some of those have been modified and brought back. We did intend that this would come to your attention. If you're comfortable today after the discussion of voting on it, we would like to take action, but I also want to assure you this is in no way intended to catch you in a position where you're not prepared. We understand this went out about 10 days ago, but we'd like an opportunity to have you discuss it, or for us to discuss it with our attorney. And so after that, we'll determine whether or not we're prepared to adopt that. So can I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Yes. Second? Second?
Who was the seconder?
Discussion. I'd like to introduce our attorney. If I see where our attorney.
Chair Chapman?
And
Office.
and Hunter, you will take us through the changes. And if we have any legal issues, please refer to the attorneys.
Madam Chair, what you have in your packets are three components. One is the proposed revised Code of Regulations, the sort of clean copy. Then you have a summary of the changes, which we'll go through. And then for those who are obsessive about track changes, we have the track change version. So you can see where the changes were made. What we reviewed with the executive committee last time were the changes that are outlined in the summary on Article 2. Changing the use of alternative directors instead of alternates and consortium instead of corporation. Section 2.1.
Hunter?
Yes.
If you could, before you get into the detail of that, if you could just give a 2 or 3 sentence summary as to why we are undertaking a revision to the Code of Regulations, please.
Very good. There are a couple of reasons to undertake this, and Jerry, you may want to also add in your comments on this. One is this is the annual meeting, and it is appropriate to go and look through your Code of Regulations and your other governing documents on a regular basis to ensure that you're up to date. Number two, and there's another material fact, is that we changed attorneys. And for a variety of reasons, which I think we're aware of in terms of potential conflict of interest with the prior attorney, we engaged Buckingham Doolittle to be our attorney, and they, in doing their due diligence, went through the Code of Regulations and the conflict of interest form, and said, here are some changes. And number three, it gets to Grace's point, which is sort of the bigger issue. This Code of Regulations really was developed several years ago for an organization put together to do a HUD grant. And various pieces of the language of this document really reflect that concept. We've matured. We've gone through a process over the last year of organizational development. We found as we went through terms dealing with work streams were out of date. We added the whole component of products. That was not, and the product teams were not reflected in this. We changed our sort of a committee structure, both in terms of the core committees for the organization and in terms of working groups. And the Code of Regulations did not reflect that. It reflected how we thought about this, basically right after we got the grant. And so there were a number of inconsistencies. And finally, there are a set of recommendations that our lawyers have made to basically clarify, simplify the code and to align it better with the Ohio Revised Code and best practices. So those are the broad reasons to undertake this. Did you want to add to this?
First, I want to thank you for inviting us and also for selecting us as your counsel. I think really Hunter summarized everything. I think it's also great that he could say that an attorney came in to simplify something. But we have tried to take. We met with. Thank you, with Hunter and also with Emma, and tried to get a sense of what the organization had evolved into. The document that you were using was not at all a bad document. It was in relatively good shape, and we added some things that we felt other nonprofits of your stature would have, and then we tried to conform it to what we thought your actual practice was. So I think I think you hit the main points. And Amanda did where are you, Amanda? Amanda did the heavy lifting on the Code of Regulations, so if you have specific questions, I'll defer to her.
Well, we can go through this, or answer questions, because I think we did submit it to you before. What is your pleasure?
I would appreciate if you just went through very quickly and gave us the high-level executive summary of the types of changes and then the changes that you made.
Well, I think under particularly under membership, we added language around the nominating committee and its role and that's section 2.2, and its role in working with the members on cash and in-kind contributions and any renegotiations. On the powers of director, we were very clear about that and added into that specifically language about the role of the directors in entering into and authorizing the executive director to enter into purchases and contracts. And as you know from the discussions this summer, we agreed that the board will act on contracts over $200,000. In terms of the one of the key areas that was an area of discussion was the question of membership and quorums. I know we were getting some confusion about that between the executive committee and the board. We're very clear that the board of directors, each member organization has one vote, and while alternates may serve on the executive committee, the board if there are 33 members of the board, there are 33 members of the board of directors, or if there are 33 organizations, there are 33 members of the board with 33 votes. One of the areas that was discussed at some length with the executive committee was action without a meeting, and Jerry, you may want to, or Amanda, you may want to talk a little bit about that provision, which is provision 3.5.
I guess with 3.5, we added in that language, a lot of the nonprofits that Jerry and I work with do have a provision so that action can be taken without a physical or in-person meeting. This just allows, and again, it can be changed to whatever is most suitable, but this allows for either electronic mail or some other method of taking action without actually having to congregate all together in one place. And it's just it's a pretty common, for most of the nonprofits we do, it's an easier way to allow things to get done where you don't have the time to actually meet. So if there's an issue that comes up that needs to be addressed right away and you don't have time to congregate, it's a good way to allow for that.
Right, and this is a highly exceptional idea, or a highly exceptional occurrence, we think, but given the distances involved, there was some desire to give some flexibility. Steve?
Yeah, as I understand reading the current language of section 3.5, it requires this signing by all directors, so that would require 33 votes, correct?
That would, if you were going to do it by unanimous written consent, then it would be all one representative from each, so 33 votes, yes.
But there's nothing in that paragraph provides for anything else but all the directors signing off.
For that paragraph, right. There's. Go ahead.
No, but again, you can change it for however you want to operate. So if you want the simple majority again by either mail or electronic mail, you can provide for that. This is just sort of the provision to allow you guys to basically have a meeting without being here in person. So however the vote is.
The purpose of this clause is one of those emergency situations when they close the highways and you get bad storm conditions and there's something that has to be signed or acted upon by a deadline. It gives you the opportunity. And because we took the most conservative approach, which, as Amanda said, you can change, but our thinking was that if you weren't at a meeting where you could meet face-to-face and discuss and debate, then it should be by unanimous consent. It should be something that people are comfortable with, comfortable enough that it would be unanimous.
And there questions came up in our session about the executive committee about the Ohio Revised Code and how this fits in, given not our intention to act in accordance with that.
Right, and it is in conformity with the law, and we tried to make sure that everything was, but that is, and then there's been discussion of other alternatives, like a formal meeting like this, but allowing somebody to attend and participate by phone or by some other method, and we've tried to make the bylaws broad enough that you'll be able to do alternative things if that becomes important.
Okay. Yeah. The next section, in section 4, it deals with the executive committee, and again, we are now aligning the executive committee with the discussions that we had this summer about the contractual authority between $100,000 and $200,000. One of the questions again that came up this summer was the question of membership on the executive committee and what is a quorum. The revisions provide that members and alternates can be members of the executive committee. And as members of the executive committee, members and alternates have a vote on that committee. So again, the distinction with the board, the number of votes equals the number of member organizations, but in the case of the executive committee, the number of votes is a function of the candidate slate you just elected. Each one of them has a vote, whether they are a member or representative of their organization or an alternative member of their organization. In the case of the board, a quorum is a majority of the members. In the case of the executive committee, we recommended that there be 6 members. That 6 members would constitute a quorum. In addition, we go on to talk about the board having the ability to create committees and committee vacancies to be filled in the course of a year upon recommendation of the nominating committee. So the nominating committee has a standing function. Section 4.6 and 4.7 get into the question of aligning the language in our code with the discussions and decisions that were made this year. We have created a class of committees called standing committees. These are committees we assume will exist although the long haul after the federal grant. The Technical Steering Committee, which as you know is the 4 MPO directors plus the NEFCO COG. Communications and Engagement, which we see as fundamental to the success of the organization over the long haul. Finance and Audit, Personnel, and Nominating. And then we put the other groups that we've talked about as work streams and product working groups under the classification of program and other committees. And in that area, again, there are the 5 work streams: economic development, environment, transportation and connections, housing and communities, and quality connected places. And then the 4 product groups that again came out of this summer. These are program committees that this body may shift over time and add some, drop some, and the like. So those I believe are the key ideas there. We also get clarity on the vacancies being filled, and the fact that the chair has a role in creating the nominating committee, 6.1, every year, as we've done in the last 2 years, but also conducting an annual review of the standing committees and the program committees and other committees. In other words, we felt that it's important to do a refresh early in the year to make sure that the members of these committees are still people that want to serve and they still have a continuing function, and then more cleanup. So those are the basic changes that have been recommended by your staff and your attorney and been reviewed by the executive committee. Again, they were passed by the executive committee with the request that the provision on the meetings remotely be revisited with our attorney, and that they have an explanation for this meeting. So again, Madam Chair, it's up to the body if they want to act. If you want to act today or table it today, following your discussion.
Bob?
Just one question, clarification regarding the action without a meeting. Does this section apply to remote voting at an existing meeting? And clearly there's provisions in there for action without a meeting and then how that happens. But I think what's probably more likely, like today, if we didn't have a quorum and we had a couple folks that wanted to access remotely in some capacity, does that provide for creating a quorum in that circumstance?
Currently, that provision, section 3.5, only provides for action without a meeting, right. The issue really is up to you, whether or not you want to add some sort of additional voting for regular meetings. It's not in there right now in terms of the language, but it's broad enough that it can be included.
Yeah, we understood that at the executive meeting, there was some concern about that and that you wanted to take more time. So that's something that rather than hold up all of the code of regulations, it was thought that if we got approval of the code of regulations, then the executive committee and the board can noodle on that, and then we can add a clause.
Are there any further discussions or thoughts on that? For clarification, what Bob is referring to is allowing members to be able to call in to not only participate in the meeting, but to actually have their vote counted and have their participation voted or counted as part of the quorum. Any additional thought on that?
From my standpoint, I mean, again, this is a board issue in your own comfort level. I think that taking advantage of some of the electronic things available to us are very positive. The only thing that a board has to worry about is it going to become very convenient, and because you miss something when you don't have the actual eye-to-eye and contact. But I think it is something that we talked about when I talked to Hunter and Emma. I said, if you could limit it maybe to one meeting per member per year or something like that, that ability to call in and to vote, so that you didn't have that becoming where, out of the 40-some people, a handful actually made it and showed up and everybody else calls in. The meetings they don't flow nearly as well when you do that, but it is a good option for a situation where somebody really wants to be there and for some reason physically is unable.
You want to make sure that that's clear, that that's the exception and not the rule.
Yes, and that's why I said we didn't have enough information as to what you needed or wanted, and so we decided to hold off for discussion, because I agree with you. I think that it should be an exception, not a rule.
Yeah, it's not for folk to leave out here and then next month everybody want to call in.
Right.
So we want to be clear about that. We haven't, the face-to-face meeting is what we want. It's only if it's an act of God that you can't get here and you want to be in by electronic wherewithal.
Well, if the board specifies to us what the eligibility for that privilege is and whether there's any limitation on the amount of it, we can put language together for you right away.
Hey, Jason? And just to add one other thing to what Fred said when we discussed this at the executive committee, another item we took into consideration with that is not only is the attorney said you get into a position we don't want to be where it becomes the exception, not the rule, to come to a meeting, but because we have the 6 counties in 6 months, the logistical environment at each meeting is a little different, and having provision to handle more than, say, one person calling in, or what kind of electronic communication is available, is there a phone, all that kind of stuff. I think we would want to probably try to, if we incorporated something like that, make sure it is the exception and not the rule.
One of the things that you can do that some organizations do is you can try it on an experimental basis before you amend the code. And if the organization purchases, say, a star phone, you can try it and without allowing people to attend, allowing them to discuss, maybe hold off the vote just as a trial for a meeting or two, and see how it affects the flow of the meeting. I think it's very important that this be an exception, and I don't think you can say limit it to one person, because then you have a race to who's the first person to do it. But I think you can limit the number of times a person uses it, and that will help it self-govern.
So at this point, that provision is not.
Not in there, Grace. The only thing that's in there is the provision to allow unanimous written consent, because I thought in case of an emergency, you'd need that.
So then I would suggest that we can take the vote on the code, the revisions as presented, and then direct you also to develop a protocol for the participation electronically as an exception. And we can bring that back either on a trial basis or something else, but ask you to bring that to us.
Okay, and we'd be glad to do that. And what I would ask is that if any of the members or alternates have some strong feelings, if they could email them to Hunter or Emma, and they would get it to us so that we can incorporate what your concerns are.
Any further discussion? So all in favor of the revision to the Code of Regulations, say A. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next item for action is approval of the update and revision to the conflict of interest policy. Hunter, do you want to take us through that, please?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I'm going to turn this over to Jerry to walk through the conflict of interest.
I get invited to my first meeting and then I monopolize time. I'm sorry, but if you look, there's an amended form and a clean form in your material, and you'll see that I think the conflict of interest item was in good shape. When Emma sent it to me, she said, "Will you review this?" When I got through, I said to her, whenever you ask an attorney to review something, I found changes that were important to me, but not to change the essence. I think you'll see that I emphasize the importance of it, of avoiding conflict, and even to try and avoid the appearance of a conflict. I put in a clause which would help the board determine what happens, what degree of participation can someone have when there is a conflict. So are they required to leave the room, which is the most extreme? Are they required to leave the board? And then all the way down to just refraining from a vote. And that really depends on how directly the conflict is. The essence is to disclose the conflict, and then the organization decides what's the appropriate way to remedy that. Is it just to ask the person to refrain from voting but they can speak on the motion? Is it to ask them to refrain from discussion and from voting and perhaps leave the room? Or is it something even more if it's an ongoing and direct conflict? So the rest of it was mostly tweaks. You can see them there. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to address them. If not, I think you'll see it's a pretty standard, and it does, in large measure, even the form, the annual disclosure form, pretty well tracks what you've had.
So I need a motion to approve.
Yes.
I move to approve.
Mike Challenger, and a second. Mike Lyons. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
And one final piece of housekeeping on that. You have the form in the back or in this document. We're going to pass out today's meeting a single page version of the annual statement. You got it? If you could get those to Kelly before you leave, so that we can make sure that piece of housekeeping is taken care of, that would be very, very good. That concludes the report on that, Madam Chair. Yes.
If alternates are here, should they take one of those forms for the?
Yes, I think so. I mean, you're binding your organization, so you should take it back to the appropriate party. Madam Chair, the next item on our agenda is the Leveraged Master Resource Allocation Report, and Sarah Meyer has a report on that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Started here. Okay. Well, everyone has heard me talk about leverage match before, so I'm just going to go over a little bit of where we are as a consortium, why we're collecting the leverage match information, the survey that was sent out a couple of months ago that many of you participated in, and then ways to participate in the future. So the leverage match is just another word for the local match that's required under the HUD grant. We were required to have a 20% commitment in, and we actually matched with 47%, and that's where the $1.997 million in committed leverage match comes from. That was also based on fewer members at the time when we put in the application, so we've actually overmatched on our commitment to HUD, and that's why you see up there the pledged match amount for the consortium is just over $3 million. It's because we had set the limit for, or the floor for people's commitments when they joined, or members' commitments for the consortium at about $23,000 per year. And so we've ended up with an overmatch on the HUD grant, but it's still a commitment as part of your consortium agreements. So we have to track what's actually being reported for HUD in order to draw down our federal funds. And we've had questions, I've had questions in the past of what constitutes leverage match. Obviously your time here today counts as match, your travel time to the meetings, mileage, and also any time that you're spending working on projects for the consortium, or your staffs are working on projects for the consortium. So we have developed a leverage match tracking form in order to get this information into the system so that we can report back to HUD on a regular basis. And one of the things that has come up is that it's a little bit difficult to find the time to actually track all of your time, put it into the format. We've changed the format of the form to make it a little bit easier, and there's still some lag in some of the reporting from consortium members. We are trying to get a general rate established with our government technical representative, grant rep at HUD, to make it a little bit easier for those people in your organizations that might participate kind of on a one-off basis, or want to go through the work of getting them established on the form with their rate information. Trying to do that to simplify it a little bit. We haven't gotten the clearance yet for that, but I'm hoping that'll come in the future, make the leverage match reporting a little bit easier for everyone. We are using the rates that were established in the consortium agreements for most of you, unless we've gotten updated information. And to give you an update, you can follow along with your leverage match report that you see in your packets that's passed out every meeting that I talk about. Please send in your leverage match. But we have reported to this point $1.388 million, and that's through the fourth quarter of 12. And there are a number of entities that have told me that they're in process of getting their information together. There will be more that's coming. I know I got one this morning from Eastgate. So that number is a little bit low, but you can see it's 69% of our commitment to HUD has been recorded thus far, but we're lower. We're 45% of the committed amount for the consortium agreements. So going from that, we have only about a third of the members that are on track to meeting their match requirements, and there's a few members that have significantly overmatched. Sorry if I'm getting away from the microphone. A few members significantly overmatching. There are some that are undermatching or not submitting any of their reporting. So I have just a diagram up here. It's a little hard to read, but on the left-hand side, that's really blurry, sorry about that. On the left-hand side, you have the members that have met their match commitment. You have RPI, NEOSCC, City of Akron, all the way down. So the red bars indicate what percentage of the match is still yet to be made. Blue is that's the match that's been reported. So obviously having a much more equal distribution would be the ideal, and having it about that 2/3 mark. So we've got some work to do.
Sarah, I'd like to point out, I'd asked for this kind of a visual to be put up there, because I think what's happening, and I know Sarah just said it, but I think it warrants repeating, it's not so much that all of the red on the right side of the room, folks are not participating.
Right.
In many of the cases, they're just simply not reporting their time. And so folks on the left side are reporting their time and looking like they've either met or getting close to meeting. We just need to make sure that folks understand what they have to do to report, and if there are some technical issues, certainly we can help you to overcome that so you can start reporting or continue reporting. But we've got some folks that haven't reported at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Going on to, is there focusing on that can be done? I don't know if anyone can really read that. Yes, up here is another way to represent it, that there are a number of people that have met or exceeded their commitments. Thank you, Jeff, that's a lot better. And then some that are not on track. So just showing you where you stand in terms of your committed amount, what's been reported. So that second column from the right-hand side is the percentage of what has been recorded for your own individual match commitment. And then on the far right-hand side, that column represents how much of the overall reported match each organization has made, how much for the entire consortium. So for NEOSCC, we've contributed 15% of all the reported match thus far. So we want to get that into a much better distribution. And one of the ways, sorry, that's a continuation here of the ones that are not really on track to hitting their commitment. And again, we know that a lot of these, as Grace said, have been participating. You've been at meetings. We know that there's a glitch. Right. And there's a couple of things on there. City of Cleveland, I know there's a rate discrepancy that we're working on, so that number will bounce up too. And just where we are in the reporting cycle, there hasn't been the fourth quarter receipt from all entities yet. But putting this up here just to say that we need to work on this and we want to find ways to help. And so that's where the leverage match survey came into play. And that's just another representation for anyone that doesn't like tables of just the match that's been recorded thus far. So the leverage match survey helps key people into ways to participate in the consortium going forward, and also was helping us in getting some of the budget down for Sasaki when we brought them on board, because we identified areas where we have leverage match or in-kind support that has specific skills that will be useful, and they will use that going forward. So the leverage match survey was just 5 minutes long, and it was sent around to board members and asked that you send that around to your staffs as well. And it had a kind of a variety of questions that asked about what people's professional skills were and what their interests were in terms of the products that we're going to be doing in the second phase of the consortium's work. So we had 59 respondents. It was only about 2/3 of consortium members responded, though. Consortium member entities responded. And we had even 2 non-members respond to it. And so just not the greatest of numbers there, just our respondents listing. So taking the input from the survey, built up a database that is going to be used by Sasaki and by us to, like I said, program people, find the skills and the bench strength to help with some of these products as we move forward. So it's just a little snapshot, screenshot of some of the information that was gathered on what their professional experience was, where their skills lie, if they have GIS skills, if they have policy development skills. So there's a much larger workbook that has all that information in it. Also collected information on how many hours per month outside of regular meetings people could participate, because we wanted to be very respectful that if there's certain times of year that you aren't available, that we don't ask you to do things when you're not available, and are respectful of the amount of time that you are able to commit. And then we had a pretty good range of professional experience that was represented within the survey, which is nice because we have products in all those areas. And there was a lot of interest in the scenario planning that's going to be starting up here in a couple of months as both participants for your organization, which is a necessary and useful thing for everyone to be involved in, but then also in doing small group facilitation at the scenario planning workshop, helping with logistics for them. So there's a variety of different tasks that people will be asked to participate in going forward. So this is a way for members to get a little bit more direct information as to what can I do to help the consortium. There's specific projects and products that we're asking people to participate in. Okay. And so just some examples of other ways to meet your commitment in 2013. Obviously attending the meetings as you have been, but really encouraging your staff to participate as well, especially as we move into the product development phase. And so for each of those products, their first work group meetings are going to be held in February. And there's been outreach to work stream members, the old work streams that we had, for people who wanted to transition, do work, continue with the consortium as we move forward. And there will also be the outreach to the survey respondents, as I mentioned, based on their self-selection of what they were interested in. And then there's also, in our scoping process that we've been going through with Sasaki, they've identified specific things where we will have to step up and get the in-kind support to help supplement in order to get all the work done that needs to be done. So data analysis and GIS are a large area that we could use assistance, as well as some of the publicity and graphics and pamphlet production, things like that for the process moving forward, and the small group facilitation. I know Patty's very interested in getting support and assistance for that as well. So in order to that you guys not have to hear me talk about leverage match anymore, the communication engagement work stream did offer at the executive committee earlier this month to assist in outreach to the members of the consortium who maybe haven't been participating as much, to see what it is that they would like to do, what would be most advantageous for them, and if we're missing any way for them to be engaged in the process as well. And so some of that is going to be to help the organizations if there are issues in the leverage match reporting form, if there's, they need some help in actually filling out the form, but more in getting involved in conversations as to what is the best way for them to participate going forward. And I don't know if Mike, if you had anything that you'd like to add to that, or Fred.
Well, I have always thought of the communications and engagement including this internal kind of engagement. So I think it makes sense for our work group to participate in this. I think part of the challenge of this whole project is how do we utilize the in-kind commitments to productive engagement and not just administrative meetings. I think that will always be a challenge for us, but I think that's where we can really gain some real benefit from this process. So, and the way I see it, it's kind of two sides. One side is the staff and the program doing work to make opportunities for that participation. The other half of it is from the consortium member side to take initiative to contribute to those activities and to offer not just work, but ideas and more deeper contributions. So, as we move into this, I would ask everybody to try to absorb this, consider how your organization can be a productive contributor to these efforts. And without that initiative, I think the staff can only do so much in trying to solicit that assistance or to even lay the foundation for providing those opportunities. So I think we all have to appreciate the necessity for taking some initiative and not just waiting to be asked to do a task or to do some some contribution. So just add that.
All right. So if anyone still has leverage match information that is floating out there, they need to get up to speed. I see a few people smiling out there. The format is the same as the version in July. Was emailed out to everyone on January 11th as well. It is up on Glass Cubes. I know that's not the easiest site to navigate, but it's under the administrative area. You can always ask me for another copy of it if you need it, but it does have tabs for each of the quarters going forward and backwards if you need to catch up on reporting. And historical meeting attendance is also available, has been available on Glass Cube, so if you've lost track, you can at least capture that information. And then the forms are due pretty much within a couple of weeks after the end of the quarter, but if your accounting systems need a little bit more time, whatever, that's fine. And please do email them to sustainablecommunities@mpo.noaca.org. That's the best place for it. And that is what the form looks like. It's pretty simple. You just have to note what your activity date was, description, location, and how many hours. And we'll use whatever information we have on file in terms of rates. If you want to update it, you can update the CFO form that's part of that workbook along with it. Otherwise, just fill that out, send it in. And also the leverage match survey will remain active. It was never officially closed, so that if you do think of anything or a person on your staff who you'd like to participate in the process, you can direct them to that link. Are there any questions? Rachel.
What happens at the HUD level if we meet our match, but not everyone who signs the agreement meet their match? Is there any?
We're contractually bound to that 47% match, which is the 1.997. So they would love to see that the full match commitment is made, the $3 million, but they're not going to. I guess there's no contractual document that holds us to that, other than our consortium agreements internally bound all of us to one another, that we're going to make our best efforts to be engaged and participate.
But as long as we meet that 1.99, they don't care who it comes from. I'm just
right.
Not that everybody should be off the hook, but
that's the major hurdle. That's the one that we absolutely need to get over. Any other questions? Okay. And I'll be here after the meeting if you have any questions.
Two final pieces of housekeeping in this, our annual meeting. One is you have in your forms, in your packet, a form for updating the director or primary representative of your organization and the alternate. And you can see on this form that there are several there are several individuals who are no longer involved in the organization because of changes in office, like John McNally in Mahoning County, or decisions to step down and have somebody else take that role, like Tom Carroll, which we just heard about earlier. This needs to be up to date as well. Kelly is the keeper of this. If you would do it today or get it to us immediately this week, so we can close out the housekeeping discussion and go forward with a complete, accurate set of lists. The other piece of housekeeping I just wanted to draw your attention to is you may be aware of, or may have sort of looked at the agenda and seen that it's different than the ones we've had before. Part of what's going on is we are transitioning from a ministerial organization getting going, with a lot of startup types of discussions, to a more action-oriented organization around some key products and plans that we have to accomplish this year. And in discussions with Grace Colucci, came forward with a agenda format that basically starts with for action, then for discussion, and then for information. So we put the action items up front, particularly important in a situation where we might have a thin quorum and people have to leave. The discussion items, as we've just gone through. Information, it's our intention to get your information from the committees in a written form, with the idea that the chairman of these committees or the staff serving these committees is available for any questions, but we're not going to go through reports per se. And then, again, the organizational issues with month-end financial, open and pending contracts and leverage match being a consistent, important factor, but again, only to be dealt with on a question or exception basis. And I hope that this is a format that will allow us more time, and I know, Jason, you and I and Mike Lyons talked about this several months ago, to try to move as much of the action into the beginning of the meeting, so as much time as possible, the time we have together, can be devoted to discussion. In keeping with that, let me turn to two discussion areas. One is the quality connected places typology, and the other is the 2012 year in review, which we didn't get to last month. The Quality Connected Places Committee, as you know, is sort of the last of the work streams to report out. It's finishing its final report. The idea there was that this is a committee, to remember from some of the early organization charts, that pulls together a lot of the work that's been done by the others and makes it much more place-based. It came about from the concept that we needed to link economic prosperity and environmental quality and equity together, and to bring the work stream products and observations that appear in the conditions and trends to platform. It's a qualitative more than a quantitative analysis. It also is producing a key input, as you recall from the discussions on scenario planning, in terms of typologies. And the reason to present this to you today, other than to get closure on this work, is to enlist your support over the coming weeks, just to go into the site on glass cubes, look at the report, and add any information you have on places, assets, and attributes of communities that you know of that we haven't picked up. And I'll talk a little bit about how we proceeded this year. We had 40 volunteers, participants from all over Northeast Ohio and the MPOs and COGs. It was a broad spectrum. It wasn't just as designers. I had business organizations, research conservation organizations, and the like. It met 10 times over the course of the year to really probe at the question of what is a quality place. What are quality connections? What do we mean by placemaking? These are ambiguous terms in many respects. How do we define our region? How do we explain it to others? How do we look broadly? And so one of the first things we did, and then came back to at the end, was looking at the landscape framework. And what are the landscape characteristics? And one of the things that David Beach pointed out in his presentation some months ago is that a fundamental characteristic of Northeast Ohio is the glaciers. God wanted this area to happen. The glaciation line is right below, and I believe it includes portions of Stark County. It's basically where the Appalachians really begin. But this is gradual well-tilled land, well-drained land, and it's in two watersheds. And that's one of the points that came clearly out of the environmental work stream, Rachel, the difference between the Ohio River watershed and the Lake Erie watershed. And often in Northeast Ohio, we see ourselves, in the media at least, as Green City Blue Lake, and leave the communities that are in the Ohio River watershed sort of as stepchildren. Well, the reality is about 50% of our land area is in the drainage basin to the Ohio River, and you heard from Dave Liebert when we were met here in Akron about how Akron really sits right at a point of the two drainage basins. So we set about creating landscape framework maps, which are going to be very helpful in the scenario planning process to frame up the landscapes, the communities, surface water and watersheds, landscape connections. How does this region come together? What are some of the natural habitat paths and the likes and resources? And drawing from the work of our works particularly of the environmental work stream and Joe McDonald's work. We also, in a very broad sense, looked at land use and building typologies. And as you recall, we got into considerable detail doing the region-wide land use and zoning maps. Out of that, we said, there are some broad typologies, which are building blocks, and again, we use those in the scenario planning process. But there are three basic broad categories: mixed use, single use, and transportation. We broke those down further into residential, commercial, industrial, and have developed a palette. This is one example. This happens to be an example from Northeast Ohio of residential live-work mixed use in Cleveland, the Tower Press building. There are other examples. This is where, if you do have the time and take the time to go into the site, these are the sorts of situations where the more we can draw from the region, the better. Things that are resonant with your communities. We also then looked at community assets, and we've talked a lot about we're an asset-rich environment, and we're also a water-rich environment. We have a natural landscape that's unparalleled in terms of parks and sporting venues. But what about festivals and cultural institutions and mixed-use districts and historic districts? We developed a database of each asset. What's its claim to fame? Is it a region-wide asset? Is it a local asset of significance? How do we begin to judge it? This again is a platform. It's an evolving list. We're going to ask you to add to it, and and other participants. But as a starting point, we looked at what are regional assets and local assets. This may be a little hard to see with the light, but one of the things that our staff has done is to look at the clustering of assets. What you see on the right are a typology of assets. Some are sports facilities, art facilities, cultural assets. Where are they? That happens to be in downtown Cleveland. And where are the clusters of those? And so, Jason, we begin to look at Akron and where are these assets? What can you build on? Canton has some remarkable assets. What can we build on? We found that 28 communities within the region have definable asset clusters. We've developed draft findings for those. Again, it begins to provide some structure to the discussion and an ability to look across the region. Now, the other thing that we began to look at, and again, all of this sort of came out of the discussions that we had in those 10 meetings, is there a typology of similar communities? I mean, as Shara knows, when you walk into downtown Elyria, you look, it's almost identical to walking into downtown Warren. Very, very similar communities. The Western Reserve communities have an industrial base. Well, we're beginning to say, well, that's not the only similarities. How can we develop a typology looking at characteristics about size and demographics and education levels and the like? And there's a lot of tables that follow on this. This happens to be one way of looking at it, where we've developed 10 different community definitions. And what it's beginning to suggest to us is there's ways of clustering groups. And as we've talked with Sarah and the product team, this becomes a very valuable way of thinking about how do we develop tools and policies and pilots that work in urbanizing townships, declining industrial center cities, post-war suburbs, all sorts of different types of communities in Northeast Ohio. And is there a way to get into this? And so the typologies is a way. And again, we can get into greater discussion for those who are interested in it. But it is on the site. We hope to boil this down to probably about 6, which will be useful particularly to our product teams, but also to the scenario planning firm. Many of you participated in the charrette we had last October, where we took these different types of communities. We developed sort of 6 prototypes of communities found in Northeast Ohio, like a traditional urban core and an industrial waterfront and a suburban edge district and a small town. So does the way we're thinking help us to look at the similarities across Northeast Ohio? So there's something that people can say about how do you develop quality connected places in a prototypical small town in an urbanizing county. And we found out of that a list of real strong commonalities. And particularly important for those of you who remember, participated, remember, was the role of landscape connections to pull communities together. It developed some broad strategies that this group can apply. What are the next steps? One is to finalize the summary document. It's very important that the QCP group can continue to support the scenario planning process. And you remember in our organization chart, that committee has a supporting relationship to the scenario planning firm because they've been out in the field. They've been looking to see what is unique and typical about Northeast Ohio. We wanted to make sure we didn't go through a scenario planning effort and find great examples from Phoenix that really weren't applicable here. So this is populating that, but this group will be available and working with that. We'll be meeting in February to go over the findings from next steps from your perspective and from the staff's your staff's perspective. Is to go on glass cubes and provide us with feedback. The QCP work stream on the QCP products. Go on it, take a look at it, see if there's some things you'd say, well, you really should look at this in my community, or that, or you forgot something when you look at the asset list. Oh, I forgot we didn't put the Detroit Shoreway Arts District. We're going to be presenting to the Cuyahoga County Arts collaboration this week, talking about how do we make sure that the work that's going forward is as robust as possible from communities that understand these cultural assets and unique characteristics. So, Madam Chair, that is the report I have on QCP. Are there any questions on that? Yes.
Hunter, great work. I think the typology is a really neat idea, and I know in some of my work at AMATS, being a forum for elected officials, it is amazing how much they'll rely on our organization sometimes to share what's going on in a similar community just within our 2-county region to try to solve problems or if they've encountered similar challenges. So I think it's really great. Is that on the website yet, or is that still on glass cubes?
Jeff, do you want to talk about the location of these things?
They are not on the public website yet, but they will be shortly.
Okay. And then just one follow-up. This probably makes an already complicated endeavor a little more complicated, but I was thinking that some of the largest cities, Akron or Cleveland, they're so big that dealing with the city as a whole, even maybe for general purposes, makes sense. But was there any discussion at QPC or maybe in the work that Sasaki is going to do about trying to zoom in even a little bit further to the neighborhood level to try to maybe share, neighborhood to neighborhood stories between the larger cities?
Yeah, I think that's an important factor. We have developed a sort of a preliminary look at that typology of neighborhood communities. There's, for instance, I think similarities between Slavic Village in Cleveland and the Briar Hill neighborhood in Youngstown because they're old working class mill neighborhoods. There's similarities between some of our suburbs and some of your fancier neighborhoods in the 1920s in Akron. That I think can help do that. But I think you're right. We have to break it down into the neighborhood level. This is really perhaps a first cut at it, and particularly important to make sure that we are dealing with communities that often feel themselves neglected. Now, one of the striking findings from the community typology was we've got about 400 plus communities in Northeast Ohio. About half of them are townships. Well, over half of them are townships, actually. A significant amount of the development that's taking place is in townships, and Within that, there are different types of townships, and we talked about that, about townships in Summit County are different and play a somewhat different role than townships in Mahoning County, and clearly townships in Geauga County are different again, or Medina. So part of what we're trying to do is to make sure we're looking at all parts of the region. But to your point, within these larger core cities, there are strong similarities, particularly a class of cities that is becoming known as legacy cities. Those are the older industrial cities like Youngstown and Lorain and Akron and Cleveland and Canton, which share a lot of the common characteristics of age, abandonment, strong historic assets, racial polarization, economic polarization. There may be some groupings that come out of that, and some subsets in that. But yeah, we're going to get into that. Again, it's an evolving process, and if you can go onto Glass Cubes and suggest some vectors, that's something we certainly can look at.
Just to add, Freddie's not here, but Freddie does have a group of City of Cleveland representatives from the neighborhoods that Hunter you presented to.
Right.
He's had 2 meetings of that group just within the city hall, as well as some of the neighborhood groups. So he's already begun that process in the City of Cleveland.
Frankly, one of the big opportunities I think lies in this is learning, as neighborhood leadership, learning from each other. The things going on in each one of our communities are quite unique and special, and we can very much learn from each other at the neighborhood level as well as at the community level. This is an objective way of defining types of groupings. So maybe you get this group that's in dark green over here with this group, and all the groups in light green. By classification, by grouping. So they're working with each other with shared issues and opportunities. Okay. Let me turn briefly then to the year in review. You had a handout on this last month, and this is a dynamic look at what we've accomplished in the last year. In terms of one of our key areas, NEOSCC and Vibrant NEO, we've expanded our board, done the mission, vision, and purpose, and the work program with the specific 5 action plans. The work streams involved 150 individuals and over 120 organizations. We've engaged the communities across the 12 counties in 12 months, done the survey, and one of the striking things was the percentage of residents that are satisfied or very satisfied with Northeast Ohio as a place to live, and almost 70% saying it's a good place to do business. About a quarter of our people travel 30 miles or more to work. And a high degree of support for the concept of sustainability for future generations, almost 93%. And again, what we've seen repeatedly in other surveys, 89%, 90% of people want governments to work more closely together, more efficiently, more effectively. We produce the conditions and trends. I think one of the striking numbers that I've found is 1.8 million parcels of land. We have done the land use and the zoning for 1.8 million parcels, thanks largely to techniques that were developed at AMAT. We're looking at zoning and recommendations of how to proceed, and leadership from SCAT. So we've done the county land use maps. We've scanned and reviewed over 200 plans. The findings, we've had 2,500 unique visitors to the CAT platform on 37,000 page views. The length of time has been 7 minutes, which I'm told by Jeff is pretty good. It means people are not just flashing, dashing through the conditions, they're looking at it. We've identified already 123 best practices, 477 assets. Again, these are going to grow. We've visited half of the counties in Northeast Ohio. We've set up Vibrant NEO and have a 6 minute average time. We've begun the process with the editorials, and Jason and I co-authored the one in the Plain Dealer. We've had about 50 stories already, and 3 MPO COG meetings. We've engaged at this point approximately 500 young leaders at meetings. We've had engagement meetings at this back in December in 6. We've added to that. And we've continued to grow our network of networks with 1,300 newsletter actors, 600 Facebook likes. You wanted 500 by when? The first of the year? Okay, we've got up to 600, and we're getting daily posts and an active blog site. So again, if you want to keep up to date with what's happening, go on vibrantneo.org. So with that, I think, Madam Chair, the next, are there any other questions about the year in review? I think it's been a very active year. We've accomplished an enormous amount internally and a significant amount externally as well as we've moved this organization forward. And thanks to everybody who's participated so much. Finally, we have the report. Again, the executive, technical, finance, and communications engagements are in your packet. Are there any questions on those to the staff or the chairs? Again, you heard the nominating committee report last month. Also under organization, the year-end financials, open and pending contracts, and the leverage match, which you've had an extensive presentation from Sarah. Are there any questions on that? If not, let me turn to the next 2 months, February and March, to look ahead. This is the broad calendar that we looked at last December. This is under revision as we speak, under refinement. We had about 10 days ago a 2-day meeting with the consulting team and the core staff to develop the more detailed work program. Particularly for the first 4 months of the work up through April, with a more general work program following. But again, I think you've seen this before. This will be revised and modified to include additional meetings and sub-meetings within it. But it's the broad pattern of the work plan, fiscal model, the business as usual. Scenario developed in April, by April, an online tool for surveying starting in April for about a month. Some really interesting ways of engaging people online. We've met also with several of our libraries to start looking at ways to engage those the folks in that. We are dealing with the alternative scenarios. And workshop in June, analysis and preferred scenario draft coming forward in September, late October and September, developing the preferred scenario and the final report. It's a very aggressive schedule. We are going to go through that in detail with you at the February meeting. That's an aggressive schedule. We're prepared to deal with it. But again, we have, as Grace pointed out, time limitations on the budget and also on the deliverables to HUD. So this reflects that work. It's going to be involving a considerable number of you in the in-kind work as well to bring all the information together. Patty and Chobe has been a key transition leader between the two. As you know, last time we basically concluded phase 1 of your work, and there's a few outlying elements that we're doing this month, and put the engagement work into the Sasaki contract. So in terms of upcoming objectives, and again, I believe you have a copy of this in your packet. The regional scenario fiscal impact work will be focused on the beginning of the development of the fiscal impact, the closing out of the fair housing survey for the regional assessment of impediments, concluding the data collection and beginning the analysis. In terms of engagement, developing and recruiting for the citizens advisory committees, organizing caucuses and other county meetings. We'll have the product development, the first work group meetings at the end of February. We will have presentations. We have here the technical steering committee. The work program will be presented February 12th, and the executive committee and board. Going to March, continue to complete the development of the fiscal impact work, then the presentation, the fair housing forums, regional AI in each county, the engagement work around the Citizens Advisory Committee and the caucuses. And you recall the caucuses are the groups of organizations such as transit agencies and park boards. Lorain County Community College, Shara Davis is a key part of their in-kind. Will be organizing that work with our consulting staff, and then developing in March from the dashboard preliminary indicators, a policy needs brief, and toolkit development, working off of the work that's already been done, and then a set of meetings coming forward. We will be presenting the preliminary research from the AI and the dashboard preliminary indicators as well. Again, an aggressive schedule. We'll be presenting that in detail at the February meeting. We're presenting it first to the technical steering committee, and then to the executive committee. Let me turn this. If there are any questions on that, let me turn this then over to Jeff and to Patty to bring you up to date on communications and engagement.
Thanks, Hunter. One thing you will notice, we didn't pass out the placemat this time. We're working on a new schedule for it, so the 11 by 17 Joe Hadley documents will be back in publishing next month. So, but you do have in your packets the objectives that Hunter just went over, a list of events, external events over the next month, as well as kind of the February watch list of things that are important for you to keep an eye on. Relative to communications in the next couple of weeks, I have begun to reach out to individual board organizations to kind of do a communications audit or review with what type of communications resources we can count on over the next year, be it a website, your social media, some of your other media outlets. I've conducted, I think, 5 or 6 of these conversations, so I'll be reaching out to more of you in the next couple of weeks to do that. And what we're really looking for is how we can best network some of this information out, particularly when we get into the throes of engagement and some of these online tools, and how we connect your websites to that, as well as connect to your newsletters, and vice versa as well. When you have things that you want to celebrate in our newsletter, you can let us know, or if you want something blogged on, you can let us know about that as well. So, secondly, the third week of February, we're going to be beginning some editorial board visits. And the visits will be, I think, with 12 different dailies throughout Northeast Ohio. Primarily, we'll be talking with them about the upcoming work plan and schedule for 2013 to kind of tee that up for them and to hopefully get their individual newspapers involved in helping to publicize this. This will be something that will be attended by both Hunter and representatives from the different parts of the region of the board. So if we're in Youngstown, we'll probably call on John and Bill and other folks from the Youngstown region. In Cleveland, we'll call on Grace, and Akron, of course, the city of Akron, and Jason, so on and so forth. Because what we really want to do is make sure that we're presenting a localized picture and how important some of this is on a local level, not just as a regional initiative. So I'll be reaching out to all of you about that. We'll have short briefing sessions before going into the meetings. And similarly, we're going to be doing some outreach to state and federal officials about our work so far, and you might be tapped to attend some of those meetings as well in late February and early March. We have begun to get many, many requests to come out and speak about our work, and in some instances it's to small groups, 20 to 30. On Friday, Hunter's speaking to nearly 100 people at the Arts and Cultures Roundtable. But what we want to do, similar to the editorial boards, is get you all involved in that process. Some of you did speak at some of the MPO engagement workshops or the county level workshops, and we want you to be comfortable with some of our presentation materials so that we can just hand off some of those sections to you. So again, we'll be working with you on that over the next couple months. And then lastly, in your packet is a copy of the final messaging materials that we presented and had those workshops on back in December. If you recall, they were half-day workshops with some of the board members and staff that our strategy ran with Carreri. There's a final messaging document in there. There's some other presentations that I'm going to put up online that you can access and take a look at, but let me know if you have any questions. And then lastly, I did want to highlight one of the new features of our website that we launched at the beginning of the year, and it's under the NEO 101 or NEO Educational menu, and it's a best practices page really focused on learning and sharing best practices. And as Hunter mentioned, there's 132 best practices that were identified via the staff that are both local, regional, and national across all the categories of our work. So if you think about all of our work streams, as well as through some other categories related to sustainability and collaboration. This again is we view it as an organic database. We want it to add to it, to take a look at things and to be challenged at things that we start to put up there. But it is something that is sortable both by type of best practice, location, also by description and topic, and what type of tool it is. So if you go to the website under the best practices page, you can find it there, and there's a form right next to it to submit best practices, and we've already gotten some online that have been sent to us. So, any questions? Thank you for coming out today. Patty?
So I first want to just thank Sarah for going through the leveraged match explanation. I think given what we are about to embark on with regards to engagement and planning, understanding how we are going to take everything that the organization has been doing for the last few years and literally use it to develop a regional vision is like a really big idea. And now it's time that we're going to be moving in an action-oriented way to actually get there. And so as we round out the first phase of engagement work, many of you have been participating in these meetings already. We have a couple more that we are almost ready to publish the date and time and location of the meeting. But the point that I want to make about not only the leverage match, but also what Jeff just went through with regards to communication is going to be paramount as we begin all of our activities that will take us down the path of the very iterative scenario planning process. And so next week, we will be sitting internally with staff to literally go through a day-by-day schedule for 2013, because that's how complex not only the planning activities, but the engagement activities are. And so we're trying to be mindful of all of your existing meetings. Once we get an internal document that we are comfortable with, we will be presenting it to the communications and engagement work stream. That will be another filter through which we will look at the likelihood and the practicality of executing all of these activities and events so that we can have this cycle of 3 rounds of scenario planning workshops to roll out in 6 places across the region. What we will be asking you to do when you see that schedule is to really go through it with a fine-tooth comb and to make sure that not only can we leverage the resources that your organizations bring to the table, but that we're also not in conflict with any major activities that are happening, and in fact that we're more complementary and in alignment. And so when I say it is a day-by-day schedule, it is a day-by-day schedule, because to try to coordinate the Citizen Advisory Committee activity, the caucus committee activity that Shar is taking the leadership on, and then the scenario planning engagement, while we try to do the 4 products, we're going to have to be really intentional. So my message to you today is please free up some of your time in early February. Our communications and engagement meeting will be on February 6th. We will quickly revise that schedule and get it out to all of you. And again, need you to look at it with a fine-tooth comb, and even have some folks within your organization do that, because as we've been building the network of networks, It's gotten complicated and comprehensively very quickly. And so for any of you who've ever done project management and you understand what a critical path is, we have one critical path for 2013. And that's going to come out of how we bring all of these things together, including the March and June meetings for the AI study research release. So if you are helping us out with these meetings, I want to thank you ahead of time. And again, we've got a couple more to get on the calendar so that we can have gone through our network building process in all of the 12 counties. And again, I just want to shout out to Mike and Don for the great meeting that we had in Lorraine, and to Bob and his team and Corey Miner-Smith in Stark County earlier this month. Any questions? All right, here we go.
Okay. That concludes our report.
Thank you very much. So does this take us to the end of our agenda then? We don't have a place on here, and maybe it's somewhere else on here, but just for anybody to bring anything else up.
New business, yeah. New business, yeah.
New business or old business, any kind of business that you want to bring up. Then I would look for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
So Mike and then Jason. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
There's an updated board schedule in your packet. We've moved the next two meetings from Hudson to the Akron Urban League in February and March. And we are also, for those on the executive committee meeting, moving that meeting to the day of at 11 o'clock, preceding the board meeting at 1. So